Thanks. I just want to give a shout out to the DevTO crew. Thanks a lot for having me here. I know you guys don't usually have 3 talks, but hopefully you guys can hang in there for the last 15 minutes and we can get through this. So my talk is basically going to be about how to understand the users of your products. And it's essentially trying to understand how to become your users through data. And then you see there I just have metrics, analytics, and how to get started. So these are kind of the basic topics of how to become users through data. I want you guys to understand why metrics and analytics are important when you guys are building products. I also want to give you all a little guide on how to get started, as well as improve if you already have something along these lines. Otherwise, there's a ton of pretty pictures to look at throughout the slides. So I work as a software developer at 500px, and I work on the web application. I also volunteer for some ladies learning code events, as well as attend a few other meetups in Toronto. So this is what our site looks like. We are an online photo sharing community. And this talk was born from the time I spent implementing a variety of analytics throughout the entire site. Our platform is all user-generated content. So clearly, we want to see how we can provide the best experience for our users. We are also hiring. So if you're interested, just come and see me after the talk. So what is the difference between metrics and analytics? Metrics represent numeric information, and it's often generated by aggregating data and then presenting it in some manner. So you see this typically represented in dashboard, or charts, or readouts, or whatever else. And analytics is just an extension of that. Analytics breathes life into metrics. With analytics, you're actively working with the data in order to gain insights. Certain metrics and analytics questions can be as follows. With metrics, you can ask this question of how many users are dropping out of our product or dropping out once they come and see a website, versus an analytics question that would be something like, at what stage are these users dropping out? Another question would be, how many premium accounts do we have? Versus an analytics-based question of, how long does it take on average for someone to create a premium account? So let's focus on analytics. Who here has used analytics before, or some sort of platform along those lines? Perfect. So you guys are good. So why analytics? Analytics help you build accurate profiles of users interacting with your products, and they help you set goals. So goals are a way of measuring progress, and if you're doing a lot of work and you don't have any way, or you're not seeing any progress towards these goals, then you're going to have a bad time. And progress is what motivates us to work. Just some more tidbits about analytics. Numbers are not everything. Numbers and stats will definitely help you in the decision-making process, but ultimately, sometimes you have to go with the flow, trust your gut, and just go with common sense. Numbers are not everything. Also, you cannot track everything. You cannot build 100% accurate profiles of your users. There's always that user that maybe will log out, log back in, do some crazy stuff, log back out, have 5 accounts, and you never know. So how can we get started with this kind of stuff? My favorite kind of platforms are Google Analytics and Mixpanel. There are a ton of analytics platforms out there nowadays, but these two I found was most documentation and the most helpful as well. So Google Analytics shows you what happened in your product. It will give you page views, event tracking, goal flows, segmentation of traffic, and a bunch of other cool stuff. And it's all available on a cool admin panel, so there's no developing admin panel for that. Also, you have Mixpanel, which will basically help you identify who did what on your site. And we'll come back to that later. So page views are the most basic of metrics, and these build into all kinds of other analytics. You essentially just track every page view that users are performing on your site. And you see this kind of thing often graphically represented on blog posts such as, look what happened when I hit the top page of Reddit for the 2 days. This is how much my traffic went up. This is all page views. So this is just a quick code snippet here. The first line there, you're just setting up your Google Analytics object, and this is JavaScript, by the way. And then you are provided an account ID for your tracking, so you set that, and you just track your page view, and then you're just loading the script afterwards. And this happens on every page. So the other key analytic here is event tracking. Events are interactions users perform on your pages. Events you push to Google Analytics can have up to 5 parameters. There's 4 here, but we'll see the 5th one on the next slide. So Google's definition, I'll walk you through Google's definition of these, and then I'll walk you through my definition. So a category, as defined by Google, is a name that you supply as a way to group objects that you want to track. But in a web application sort of context, it's essentially just which page the event occurred on. The action, as defined by Google, is the parameter, is the name of the type of event or interaction you want to track for a particular web object. But simply, it's just what the user did on your site. With labels, you can provide additional information for events that you want to track. But my definition is just where on the page the event occurred on. So if you have, let's say, 2 of the same buttons on one page, you just use the label to say which button was clicked. And then value is of type integer, and rather than a string. So use it to assign a numerical value to a tracked page object. And I just define this as basically the same thing, a number representing the value of the event. So this can be used if you're tracking how much users are paying for premium accounts, and just things like that. Or if you have a store as well, you can use it for that. And this is an example of a track event action. So you have your category, action, optional label, optional value, and then you have an optional non-interaction parameter. So non-interaction is a Boolean that you can set to true when you don't want the event to be included in your bounce rate calculations. So an example of this is if a user comes to your site, performs some sort of event, then that doesn't count towards your bounce rate calculation. So this would be an example of when this would be true is when you have passive events, like an image slideshow, and you just want to count the number of images that go by before the user actually interacts with your site. And lastly, we have custom variables. So custom variables are great for tracking logged in users and tracking the types of accounts your users have. And it's also great for doing A/B testing. And I know I mentioned Optimizely in my slide intro that I was going to do, but as I went along and just looked at this, Optimizely is just something on the side that you can read up on, and Google Analytics is just, it's good enough for just some basic A/B testing. So with custom variables, you have 4 parameters, and they're pretty self-explanatory. You have 5 slots for custom variables that you can assign. Then you have the name of the custom variable, you have the value of the custom variable, and then you have an optional scope parameter. So this can either be visitor, session, or page level scope. And you can just read more about that on the documentation. So this is just an example of that. For us, we have premium accounts, so we have Plus and Awesome accounts on our site, and we just track. We say in slot 1, just set the member type as premium, and then we can filter all those events in our Google Analytics and Mixpanel. So Mixpanel. Mixpanel essentially helps you identify who did the events on your site. You attribute events to users. And some cool things are with this, you can build people with unique attributes, such as username and email. And then you can also set other attributes, such as page views or photos uploaded, in our case, on these people. So eventually, once you get this sort of thing built up in your application, now I can go into the Mixpanel and MinPanel, and then I can just say, give me all the people who have a email subdomain of Gmail, live in Toronto, have at least 50 photos uploaded and have at least 100 page views. And then that generates it all for you, and you have your emails, and you can just send off emails like that. It's just that easy. So here are just a few other helpful hints that I wish I knew when I first started off implementing analytics. You want to follow generic naming conventions across all your events, whether it be Google Analytics, Mixpanel, or whatever other kind of platform you use. And for me, I think you should keep it in present tense. So examples would be click the green button or trigger a pricing window, because you know that your users are performing these events. You don't need to say that the user clicked this green button. And this basically gives structure to all your data. It also helps multiple developers work on implementing analytics across your product. And you want to have awesome documentation. Don't leave it up to the project managers or product managers or whatever to come to the developers and always bug them and asking them, what are these events, what are we tracking, and everything like that. Just have a document that you constantly add to and update, and everybody will be happy. Another thing is object hijacking. So these platforms often use default events, such as the GAC object we saw, or Mixpanel uses a Mixpanel object, and it uses a cookie as well. So you want to just be careful while you're implementing this and keep this in the back of your mind, that there's no extensions that take over, or that there's no third-party add-ons to whatever device or browser that your users are using that will interfere with the analytics you track it. So also, to go along with that, is to just make sure you have graceful error handling. Let's just say that one of these scripts that you're loading, such as Google Analytics or Mixpanel, they're not available one day, or the service is down. Then you don't want to be throwing errors all across your site. You want your site or product to be working the way it's supposed to. So just handle your errors gracefully and everything will be okay. So, testing. These analytics can be a little tricky to test, but here are just a couple tips on that. Wrap all your analytics calls and everything in an object you control. This makes it a lot easier down the line. So let's say you don't like Google Analytics 2 months. In 2 months' time, then you can easily make that change. You don't have to go through your entire code base and then go through and refactor everything. And this also comes to development stubs. So you don't want to be reporting analytics while you develop or test your products. So a couple of solutions for this would be, one, you can either create a testing account for your analytics, and then you just report all your testing data to there. And another solution would be just use a stub for reporting out to the debugger or to the console. And you can just see all these events being tracked in real time. Or for the best of both worlds, use both. So just to wrap up, I hope you guys know what the difference is between metrics and analytics. Hopefully you guys are using it. If you're not, I would suggest to get started on it right away, because it's really a key thing for products. There's many different solutions out there, so the solution you pick will ultimately be based on what your needs are and what you want from your analytics. And here's just a quote from Carly Fiorina, who is the CEO of HP from 1999 to 2005. And it's as follows: the goal is to transform data into information and information into insight. And I think this really explains the ultimate goal of what we're trying to achieve with metrics and analytics and whatever other data that we consume and analyze. We just want to know the most we can about our users and gain the most amount of insight we can to make our products better for everyone. So, thanks a lot. I'll take any questions. There's my Twitter handle.